Okay, looks like we're all there. Go ahead and start, Jeff. We're good? Okay. I'd like to call to order the special study session of the Sumner City Council. Today is the 8th of July and the time is 6:01. I would note that all council members are present. And with that, I think we just have one topic on the agenda, which is a follow-up from the postponement of an agenda item at the last meeting. And do I call on you, Jason, to start this out?
Yes,
Okay.
Mayor.
Jason Wilson.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Before we get into the formal presentation tonight, I just wanted to make a few remarks. On Monday night, Council voted to postpone the zoning code text amendment relating to asphalt batch plans. The motion to postpone included the stated intent that it was to allow for the comprehensive plan amendment process to be completed. The approval of that motion has created ambiguity amongst staff on how Council desires to proceed with the expiring interim development regulations. We would have been in the same ambiguous position if the proposed ordinance had failed. This is not a position that staff could have anticipated, nor would it have been appropriate to presume a no vote. To date, the staff, Planning Commission, and 3 independent consultants have recommended that you continue to allow for asphalt batching in the low-density residential, general commercial, and resource protection zones within a mineral resource protection area. The recommendation was based in fact and science, and staff's recommended ordinance would have implemented strict development standards not currently existing in our code. The ordinance before Council on Monday was not about approving a facility, nor was it about changing the overall vision for this area. The postponed item was a request to amend your zoning code to conditionally allow asphalt batching in the general commercial zone. It was not a request for a property rezone, and it was not about rewriting the overall vision for East Sumner. The reality is that mining activities in the area predated East Sumner as it exists today, and those mining activities will be protected land use into the foreseeable future. The decision about whether to allow asphalt batching and other mineral processing uses in the general commercial zone or continuing to allow asphalt batching in the low density residential and resource protection zones is ultimately a policy decision by you, the council. But what staff do not and cannot recommend is that the decision that was before you on Monday night be morphed into something it is not, and processed in a manner that is not consistent with how other similarly situated requests are processed. So I'll end with re-emphasizing that Monday's action to postpone leaves the city code unchanged, and council now faces a quickly approaching expiration of the interim development regulation. And tonight we will be discussing what that means and ask council to provide staff with clear direction moving forward so that the IDR is handled in a manner that is consistent with council's policy goals. So with that, I'll turn it over to City Attorney Andrea Marquez.
Thank you, Jason. I will get PowerPoint started up here. All right, can everybody see that? Okay. So I just want to chronologically discuss this item before we turn it over for a larger council discussion. So I'm going to start with discussing where we started before this issue came before council. Where we started with our code. Asphalt batch plants are and have been historically an allowed use in certain zones in our city. So they were outright permitted in the heavy industrial zone, which is referred to as the M2. They were permitted through a conditional use permit in the low density residential zone and permitted through a conditional use permit process in the resource protection zone. This is a map that demonstrates what our code looked like before, the current state of our code and what it looked like before the council took action to adopt an interim development regulation. And so as you'll see, the 2 mineral resource protection areas in our city are shown in yellow, which represents the LDR zones where it is a conditional use permit. You'll see the small square of red in the lower corner of the Corliss pit, which is general commercial, and it is currently prohibited in our code. and the M2 zone, which is shown in green on the map, demonstrating that it was an outright permitted use. The current state of our code also lacks development and performance standards and lacks clear definitions related to accessory uses to mineral extraction. In 2003, as you'll recall, the city annexed in the Corliss property. The Corliss property is an active surface mine. They are operating under a duly issued DNR permit, and that right will continue until the site is fully reclaimed. Mining activities, as we've discussed in the past, are protected by state law, and the Growth Management Act makes it very clear that local regulations must protect mining activities from encroaching incompatible uses. So the portion of the Corliss property that falls within the city limits is a mix of a number of different zones. It is a mix of resource protection, low density residential, and general commercial. And those zones were chosen as part of a long range planning vision for what the property may become after the mine is reclaimed. Asphalt batching is allowed, as I just discussed, in the LDR and RP zones already on the Corliss property. So in order, as it was explained to the city, in order to provide consistency with the adjacent zones on their property, the Corliss has submitted a zoning code text amendment requesting that asphalt batching be allowed through a CUP in the general commercial zone as well. That application prompted the discussion that led us here to tonight over the course of the last 18 or so months. And it raised concerns and questions from the community and council members related to the potential impacts of asphalt batching. So in response to those concerns and questions, council desired to study this issue further. And in order to give them time to do that, back on August 5th, council passed an interim development regulation which prohibited new asphalt batch plants from vesting in the resource protection, LDR, or M2 zones, which are the zones where it was previously permitted. So on August 5th, the IDR was adopted. It imposed the temporary restriction, like I said, and council directed staff to begin studying the issue. So staff contracted, the city contracted with the Washington State Department of Health, who worked with the Department of Ecology to prepare a health impact analysis, contracted with Transpo Group, an engineering firm who prepared a traffic impact study, traffic impact study, and contracted with Burke Consulting, a land use and environmental firm who provided the city with a real estate valuation impact analysis. The IDR was extended an additional 6 months back on January 21st because we were still awaiting those reports. And as a reminder, that 6 months expires on July 20th. So here is a map that shows the current state of the code with the interim development regulation. It is outright prohibited in every zone that it was previously allowed either outright or as a conditional use permit. So after the city received the studies, staff after considering all of the comments that were received through the various public hearings and forums, city staff prepared a proposed ordinance to update our city code. The proposed ordinance that was before you on Monday night required a CUP for any new asphalt plant in the resource protection, the low density residential, expanded the CUP requirement into the general commercial zone. And as a reminder, it came with the added condition that that must occur within a mineral protection area, and requires a CUP in the M2 zone where it was previously outright allowed. The proposed ordinance also sought to implement development and performance standards that we do not currently have in our code related to asphalt batching, and established a clearer definition for accessory uses to a mineral extraction that our code also currently lacks. On June 4th, that proposed ordinance was before the Planning Commission, who voted 3-2 to recommend to council that the ordinance be adopted. On June 22nd, that proposed ordinance, together with the Planning Commission recommendation, were presented to the City Council. During that discussion, there was very good discussion and lots of great questions, but at no point did any council member recommend or suggest an amendment to the proposed ordinance. So fast forward to July 6th, the proposed ordinance was before you on Monday, and no action was taken on it. Instead, the motion was postponed indefinitely. And what that means is that we still have no permanent zoning code change that took place, no ordinance that was passed, and an upcoming expiration of the IDR in about a week. So based on the postponement, we have more discussion because it is important that staff have clear direction on council's desire with regard to the IDR and council's desire with regard to permanent zoning code amendments. Before I turn it over to the council for discussion, I want to take a moment to talk about interim development regulations, what they are and what they are not. So here's what the courts have said. They are designed to preserve the status quo so that new plans and regulations will not be rendered moot by intervening development. They are meant to be a temporary protective measure. During the 6-month term of the IDR, jurisdictions are supposed to be preparing and implementing appropriate permanent zoning code revisions and development regulations. And extensions of IDRs are disfavored by the courts without a really good legal justification as to why a decision cannot be made to implement permanent zoning code amendments. So at this point, staff need to really better understand council's intention with regard to the asphalt issue and with regard to the upcoming expiration on the interim development regulation. So I will turn it over to Jason, the mayor, and Ryan for a question and answer session and some really good discussion about where do we go from here.
Yeah, thanks both of you. And I see Patrick, you have your hand raised. Just a second, I just want to make a clarifying point before I call on you. And so on the 20th of July, if the IDR expires, we go back to what you had shown in one of the slides down there, that it becomes then a CUP and the RP and the LDR zones, and outright permitted in the M2 zone, and also would not include any development and performance standards. Is that correct? There you go. I just want, that would be correct, my statement, that it would, if it expires, it goes back to what you have shown on this slide, which is okay. Jason, do you have anything that's clarifying before I call on Patrick and then Council Member Hochstetter? I see you, Cindy.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor. I know I was asked by at least one council member, and we've gotten questions from the public as well. Why are we having this meeting tonight? Why did we call a special study session? And I just want to say we had to do it tonight because in order to notice the public hearing for the, if council desires to extend the IDR, we have to have that notice out by this Friday. And that's why this couldn't wait until our next Monday study session.
Thanks, Jason. Patrick.
So I had a clarifying question on the timeline and the zoning in regard, when we put the IDR in the first time, that was immediately following the zoning change of the underlying property, correct? Or was it just before? I'm trying to...
There was never a zoning change, and that was never part of the request before council. There was never a rezone of this property. The only request was to change the allowed uses within the already approved zones that are comprised of their mining operation.
So that was the vote we took last year, because the intent was absolutely to be able to rebuild in the event of a catastrophe for the
And that
Corliss.
was passed, yes.
And that's the one I was referring to, because my understanding, the language change we made at that time is what prompted the IDR in the first place, because it opened up the existing property to potential asphalt building.
No, the LDR and the resource protection zones on the Corliss property always have allowed for asphalt batch plants. The reason that the council chose to implement an IDR is because the applicant could have come in and invested in those zones at any time. And while council was studying this topic, it was important to maintain the status quo and prevent an applicant from vesting either in the LDR and RP zones or out in the M2 where you can vest at any time without a conditional use permit.
Okay, and my understanding that once an applicant is vested, it is, I don't want to say a done deal, but it's very hard to undo that process. Or for it to, if they've applied and are vested and meet the requirements, it's essentially done at that point. There's not necessarily a turning point.
When an applicant vests, they vest to the code that is in place at the time that they submit a complete application. So you're absolutely correct that subsequent conditions or development standards or prohibitions would not apply once a property owner is vested to a certain use.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. We're next going to go with Cindy, and then we'll go to Kathy. Go ahead, Cindy.
My question is, I just missed something on the second to the last page when Andrea was giving her presentation, and I just wanted to go back to that page, please. Back further than that, not on the interim. Okay.
We'll bring it back up, Cindy.
Okay, thank you. Not on the interim development regulation, but on when she was explaining the other part.
Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. So what was the topic that might help me find the correct slide that you're looking for?
Well, I was trying to read it as you were talking, and okay, just a little bit further. Farther. Farther. Okay, what's the next one? Okay. Okay, I can't tell where it was either. Right, I think it was there. Establishes a clear definition for accessory use to So that's something we were, at one point you said there was no amendments put in. There was a point where council could have maybe added amendments and we didn't.
Yeah, I said that when I was talking about the June 22nd study session. And the reason that I made that comment is because I wanted to highlight that had staff known that council had proposed amendments to the ordinance that was before them, we could have sufficiently prepared and perhaps even avoided tonight's meeting. But because there was no indication that the proposed ordinance was incomplete or didn't address the concerns that we had heard through the process, we brought forward the proposed ordinance on Monday night.
Okay, so on that, I was wondering if they're small controls, would they have gone in there? Because we no longer have any control on the conditional use permit part, right? Or do we?
Currently, as we sit here tonight, there is a prohibition on asphalt batching. But if the IDR expires, you are absolutely correct that our code does not contain conditions sufficient. It doesn't mean that we can't have staff recommendations during a CUP process that we recommend to a hearing examiner. It just means our code does not contain performance standards related to asphalt batching. And that was part of the proposed ordinance that was before council on Monday night, was to implement those standards.
So if we would have wanted to add something like maybe we wanted them to monitor their own sound, maybe once a year or once every 5 years, that's the time we would have suggested to staff that we do that sort of thing. And also if we wanted to maybe try to say they couldn't use that intersection through peak traffic times until such time that the intersection was improved, that's when we would have brought that up. Is there still time for any of those kind of suggestions?
So the short answer to that question is yes, during the study session would have been a great time to bring up proposed conditions or amendments to the ordinance. Also, as you remember, right before you take a vote on any ordinance, you have an opportunity to bring an amendment to the floor that council can consider. And so that's also a good time to discuss those types of amendments. And then with a conditional use permit, remember that the conditions are imposed at the hearing examiner level. And so any concerns or suggestions related to conditions on a site-specific proposal will also be timely during the hearing examiner process. So there's 3 separate times. Your other question, I'm going to give to Ryan because it was, is it too late to do any of that?
Thank you.
So we have the ordinance postponed indefinitely at this moment. So if we want to amend it, we'd have to bring it back off the table and then have a motion to amend and then have a amendment go forward.
And we would do that at a regular council meeting.
Correct.
And so
Well, I guess it could be, it might be able to be a special meeting, but typically it's a regular council meeting.
so the next meeting is slated to be a study session also.
Correct. The 13th is a study session.
So if we wanted to make amendments, we'd have to add a special council meeting onto the front of that or the end of that or something like that.
Yeah, if you were to do it before the 20th, correct.
All right, well, that was helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Melanie?
Okay, thank you. So this presentation was super, super helpful. Thank you very much. And I understand the position that staff is in right now and that it's uncomfortable. I also want to leave some grace for learning things when you learn them and being able to make an amendment when it has to come up. So I don't want people to feel discouraged from making things like last minute if it is the right choice. You know what I mean? Not that I think you're trying to do that by any stretch, but I just want people to hear that. I also hear that I know staff has said this entire time, like, this is not about the Corliss project, which I admittedly bristled at because it obviously is. But what I heard differently tonight and from Ryan's comments on Monday is that this is about changing our entire city code for the Corliss project to move forward because they have this GC overlay on their property that is prohibiting them from being able to do what they potentially want to do. So I appreciate that clarification. As far as clarity on what I would like so everybody knows, I would like to keep that the M2 has a CUP process, just like the other two areas. And I would like the additional protocols and safety requirements around an asphalt plant for the 3 zones that are already approved. I do not feel that the GC zone should be included in this text amendment. So I want the protection for the city on the 3 areas that's already allowed. I want to increase the M2 to the CUP as it's written. And I think that's it. Thank you again for this presentation, Andrew. It was flawless.
Thank you. That guidance is really helpful.
Thanks, Melanie. A call on Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Kathy.
So we put in the interim development regulations so that we could get public input and information that we needed, right? Then we extended it already once, waiting for the reports. Then we got the reports back and they were all good. I'm comfortable with letting the IDR expire and letting the process take place. The CUP process is a time where we can make suggestions and go forward with this. I think waiting any longer is kind of silly. And we've already extended it twice. I'm for letting it expire. That's what we have.
Okay, Kathy, thanks. Patrick, your hand is raised, but I had Charla waving at me beforehand, so I'm going to call on her first. Go ahead, Charla.
Sorry. So Councilmember Peterson actually got close to where I was going or where I was going to request. So like if she's okay with just a couple of minor changes and she's willing to sort of be a second member, I guess I would like to see an ordinance that, yes, consistent with staff recommendations, that makes the M2 zone require a CUP instead of being permitted outright. And then for both the LDR, the RP, and the M2 areas, yes, I would like for the performance standards to be included. The lowest noise, I would like it to be the lowest noise level in city code. Same thing, the not producing light, glare, vibration, disturbing the peace, same language. I would like to change, like be in compliance with or exceed regional, state, and federal air emission standards. Use best technologies available. And then 2 more conditions that were not included that I would like to talk about adding are limiting trucks going in and out to outside peak traffic hours, or at least school hours, whatever is the best way to address that. And also require trucks to be fully enclosed before they leave the premises, since that's where smell usually occurs.
Sorry, I was writing.
No, that's fine. And then with the accessory use, it like obviously like I post, you know, I'm since like we don't have to dance around it. I'm the one who requested the postponing. I don't want to touch those issues until after, I mean, people can always, you know, disagree or argue with me, but my preference is to then like limit it to where we already allow these, and then sorting that out is a separate issue.
Okay, thanks, Charla. We'll call on Patrick.
Thank you, Mayor. So my intent or my concern is that with us already looking at re-evaluating the East Side plan, doing updates to the comp plan, wouldn't all of these change, if the intent is to go ahead and allow it with all of these conditions and standards, wouldn't it be best to do that during the comp plan updates along with the visioning of the East Side plan? And if the intent is to allow asphalt, then if that's the intent, then build the East Side plan to represent that around the mineral protection areas and do it based on what the arguments have been before, that there's a lot of ambiguity about the mineral protection and what we overlaid and everything else, and just make it much more clean and clear for not only us as council, but for the citizens in general. Because my concern has been multiple areas, but the outcry of citizen concern has gotten my attention, very much so. And I know it's not necessarily, there's a combination of arguments out there. One is that people don't know the facts, or they don't know the science, or they don't understand it. All of that understood, but at the same time, people's perception is reality. It doesn't matter what piece of paper you put in front of them. If they believe historically based on different things, they're still going to feel that way, and they're still going to reach out and share their concerns with us. And I think that's something that's been going on pretty heavily. And from some of the more longer serving council members, many people have said that this is the biggest issue that Sumner has had constituent feedback on since the time they've been in office. So to me, it makes sense if we're going to go this route, and if these issues are going to be addressed, that it be done through the East Side and comp plan process, and that we don't make any additional changes between now and then, and do it as a whole and do it correctly.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Ryan, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to know if you'd like me to respond to Mr. Reed's comments.
If you have something that addresses this concern, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify the role of the comprehensive plan and the East Sumner neighborhood plan. I mean, you do comprehensive planning, you do a sub-area plan, and then ultimately you implement that with zoning code text and detailed regulations. And so going back, and also during the comprehensive planning process and a sub-area planning process, as we've all talked about, it involves the public, it involves discussions about policy. But really over the last year, during this moratorium time, this interim development regulation time, we have had an enormous amount of public input. We've done these detailed impact studies, things that you could be doing during a comp plan process or a sub-area plan update. We've done all that now. And now we're at a point where we're kind of down to the finer points. Honestly, we're down to the details. And so I don't see a benefit in taking this through another 6 or 7 months of planning, because we've engaged the public, highly engaged the public. They're interested in a decision. And so I would just encourage the council to continue to move forward with the details as other council members have proposed, and not look at taking this back to a comprehensive plan process.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate your feedback on there, but I think for the public's perception and their involvement in the process, and for the longer term vision of what we want to do in the East Side, I do still believe that it should go back into the overall plan.
Yeah, and thank you, Patrick. Melanie, do you have your hand raised? Or Andrew, do you have something that's clarifying on that, or what?
If I could just quickly ask Councilmember Reed, I understand your position and I heard you perfectly clear, but as it relates to the interim development regulation that expires on July 20th, do you have any comment about how you would like to see that play out?
I would like to see that extended through the duration of revisiting the overall plan.
Okay, I apologize if you said that and I missed it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying that, Andrea, with Patrick. I had made that assumption, but I think it's better to be stated. Okay, Melanie.
Before I ask another question, I want to make sure that other council members that haven't been able to ask yet have an opportunity.
And I appreciate that, Melanie. I'm looking for hands raised either through the participant button or
the window.
waving at me like this. And I appreciate your courtesy. I really do. But if any other council member that hasn't had the opportunity to speak would like to make any comments, either wave at me or use the technology. I respond to most anything there, or unmute yourself and say, hey, you, I want to talk. But
That's okay. I didn't mean to make anyone talk either.
no. But Melanie, I appreciate the courtesy. I do. Go ahead.
Okay. Andrea, could you pull up the map of how it currently is right now? I'm just having a question around, like regarding Councilmember Reed's comments on the public's outcry. I want to make sure that what I stated around the RP zone is in fact in alignment with what our community is hoping for. Because what I'm worried about is that by keeping it with the 3 zones that we have currently, that Corliss would be able to still build well within their RP area. So is it possible to zoom in at all? I mean, I guess we can see it. So the red zone, it's okay, Andrea. The red is the GC, is what I'm assuming, since it's prohibited. Okay, and the yellow is the RP, and everything else outside of that is county.
The yellow is LDR.
Oh, LDR, thank you.
Yep.
Well, actually, I combined them in this diagram to try to simplify it. LDR and RP are within that area.
So having worked with the applicant, Ryan, or anyone else on staff that knows, would allowing the 3 zones that are already in our plan to continue allow them space to build an asphalt batching plant within their yellow block?
Based on what I've seen in material that Corliss has provided regarding potential locations, there would still be an opportunity for them to locate an asphalt batch plant without the GC being. GC was one of the options, but there's also an LDR option. But we've not seen any, of course, applications.
Right. I understand that. And that's what I'm trying to get straight with what our community is saying and making sure I'm not misstepping on what they're asking for. And what I believe the reports said. I have a different view on the health impact assessment, I think, than some other people do. I don't know. I'd like to hear what other council members think about that point and what it would mean if we removed RP from the 3 approved in totality.
Boy, I guess I'm concerned about the RP because the resource protection area is the thing that's really based upon state law. And if you remove that, it's sort of, I don't know, that's probably more of a staff answer or input or legal, but.
And there's no problem removing resources, right? And using the land for that purpose. It's the batching that I'm concerned about.
Got it.
Sorry, Charlotte, go ahead.
Charlotte? Oh,
Thank you. So,
go ahead, Charlotte.
Councilmember Peterson, my biggest concern about leaving that out is that means we would not be providing the protection, like the added protections where like that part is less about zoning and more about it. We would actually omit that so that the protections that we just requested would not apply to that area. So, which is why anywhere there actually is a possibility, and again, we're not talking about the general correct, Andrew, I'm not wrong on that in terms of what I had suggested wouldn't change anything about the current status of the general commercial area.
Correct. If the performance standards are implemented and the zones that it was already allowed in are continued, nothing related to the general commercial would change from the prohibition that's there today.
So that's my argument for why RP needs to be included, because so that the protections cover that area as well.
Okay, before I go back to Patrick, I'm gonna endorse Cindy. I'm gonna ask if either Kurt or Barb have any comments or thoughts on that. This isn't a requirement, but it's just a courtesy question, whether you have any thoughts. Go ahead, Barb.
Well, I guess I'm a bit frustrated about, going over and over. We were given such good reports, and after going also with our field trips to the Tucci plant, there's a lot of validity to the comments that we got from the experts that I fully believe. I don't think I need to question them. And so, this is just getting like more and more complex for me. So, and it's in a way like when we're dealing with all this in our homes, it's a little bit hard to get fully engaged. I see the picture, but like it'd be nice to have a printed copy so that I could really look back and forth at it or ponder it. But if I understand correctly, if we let the July 20th expire, then I'm just not real clear about the next step. So.
Excuse me, I had to unmute myself. Andrea, did you want to make a comment?
Sure. So if the July 20th date comes and goes, and either the IDR is allowed to expire on its own per its terms, or you take official action to terminate it, the code will go back, Councilmember Botetto, to the map that I am displaying on the screen right here. Except for, it sounds like there's some desire from the council to change that. But for the meantime, it will be an outright permitted use in the M2, a conditional use permit in the LDR and the resource protection zones, and the code won't have those protections that we've been talking about. It doesn't mean that council can't take subsequent action to change the zoning code through another ordinance. It just means that there will be a period of time after the IDR expires on July 20th and the adoption of that new ordinance that an applicant could come in and vest to the current state of the code.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jason.
And just to clarify, while they can vest, there still is a conditional use permit process where the city can provide, recommended performance standards. It's just not belt and suspended like it would be if we adopted them officially in our code.
Okay, looking around. I'm going to call on Patrick, then I'll go to you, Cindy. Oh, wait a minute. Let me call on Kurt Brown first. Go ahead, Kurt.
All right. Yeah, I'm starting to wonder why we should wait till the hot plan is finished. I understand what Ryan's saying, and we've done all that. So I don't know if I agree with that anymore, but I do like standards. So I'll go with standards. Thanks.
Thank you, Kurt. I'll go back to Patrick and then Cindy. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you. And I think Andrea may have explained this answer in the last comment. To put it very plain and simple for folks that are watching and or may watch this video later, if the IDR expires on the 20th, it will allow Corliss to start the process in their current property minus the small section of the general commercial zone.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Cindy.
I know you haven't received a permit application from the Corliss Concretes, but what is the large advantage to them to have it in that small, it looks like a very small corner of commercial property. Does anyone have any ideas on that?
Ryan, do you have any
Um,
Do you have any insights into their mind that you want to share or appropriate?
Obviously, it's a bit of a guess, but when you look at their existing concrete facility, that location in the red in the general commercial is where their existing concrete batch plant is. It's kind of a leveled off plateau that would provide for, fairly readily available for development. They're selling landscaping material right now on the south side of the asphalt silos, or the concrete silos that you see. And they've indicated that would be a good location in their minds for an asphalt batch plant location. It's flat, it's close to the driveway, it's close to the intersection. I mean, there's lots of different reasons why functionally it's probably a good location for them.
Okay, thank you. And so, still within the time period, if we were to have an amendment set forward to add to what the staff has already given us, we could have a special meeting on July 15th and have a vote at that time.
Andrea?
It's certainly an option. An ordinance could also be on the agenda on July 20th at the regular council meeting in lieu of the IDR. So there's a couple of options, but a special meeting is not out of the question. And if I could really quickly respond to your first question, Councilmember Hochstetter, and add to what Ryan said, if I understand correctly, a portion of the zoning code text amendment request was based on principle as well, so that the entirety of the coreless pit was consistent in that all of the mineral processing uses were allowed on the entirety of their site. Because remember, when they were in the county, before we annexed them and changed their zoning, these uses would have been allowed on the entirety of their site. So part of it was to bring the general commercial corner of their lot into consistency with the adjacent zoning on their property.
Okay, thank you. So I like your suggestion that we actually still have time to have a vote on a regular council meeting on July. It would be the 20th?
That's correct.
Well, then how did I have the 15th for a study session? So
I don't know how you had that, Cindy. That's a Wednesday.
Okay. Well, isn't today the 8th? So a week
It
from
is.
today.
It is. It would be a special meeting. We could have one every night as far as that goes, but let's not do that.
Oh, okay. So, okay. I'm counting from the special meeting. Okay. Sorry.
No, that's totally understandable. Believe me. I have a calendar in front of me. That's why I'm so smart. I'm looking at it right now.
Okay. Thank you.
So what I'm getting here is I don't sense the energy or the will to extend the IDR. That's what I'm getting. What is less clear to me, and if somebody maybe had been taking better notes, Jason or Andrea, is between what Melanie has put on the table and what Charla has as to what that means, what that is. And I think they've spoken well to it, but some clarity in that area would help. So, and I know it's tough in a meeting like this when there isn't anything that's written up, and that is probably more than helpful down the line. But is there any understanding from either of you two that could capture that I could either get some head nods or something back? And Kathy, you're driving me nuts. I don't know whether you're raising your hand or whether you're adjusting your camera. Must be adjusting the camera. Okay.
Mayor, I might be able to clarify if you want. I think
go ahead, Charlotte.
I think Andrea picked up on this. It sounded like a long list, but just so everyone's aware, the first several things that I rattled off was text that staff had already written and was part of what they wanted us to consider on Monday. So it sounded long, but I actually only added 2 pieces, like 2 additional ones, and that's regarding the trucks for them. And I have to talk to I haven't had a conversation with staff to figure out like legally what options are, but there were technically only 2 additions to what staff had already thoughtfully considered.
So procedurally, how this could play out if this sounds good to council, and it sounds like Councilmember Peterson and Councilmember Newman have the 2 votes to get something on an agenda. So we're already beyond that hurdle. Is an amendment to the ordinance that was before council on Monday night, removing the CUP from the general commercial, keeping everything else the same, and adding the 2 additional performance standards that Councilmember Newman has proposed. And so that would be raised as an amendment. You would have to bring the motion. Go ahead.
I'm not comfortable with, there was also a section on accessory uses. And to me, that's outside the bounds of the protections that we're talking about.
In the LDR and the RP?
No, if I remember correctly, it included the general commercial, but also accessory uses in the RP. In general, I don't want to touch accessory uses because I feel like that's a larger debate and discussion, and not about protections that we're talking about for where we already allow. I think you and I are tracking on the same thing. We can like go through the language, specifically. Basically, it would be almost copy and pasting the footnote standards that were written up, but applying it to instead of general commercial, applying it to LDR, RP, and M2. And I think we would need a code change in M2 to change it from to put it into CUP. Go ahead, Ryan. Sorry. Oh, not my meeting.
You have some clarification on that one, Ryan?
Ryan wants
And then because Melanie has a comment too. Go ahead.
So in the ordinance that's proposed, I basically did that. I took the list of conditions for an accessory use that's in the GC zoning. It's a footnote on the table. And I basically took those conditions and did place them into as performance standards for conditional uses on the other zones, so LDR and RP. So that was that's what I did. Accessory uses to an existing mineral extraction operation. Currently, it says it does not include asphalt batching, right? So in GC, the code proposal is to change that to allow asphalt batching. So I don't know if
that's the part that I don't want to.
Okay.
Like that should not be. That's not part of my. I specifically do not want that in what I'm requesting.
Well, and that's understood that it would remain prohibited in the general commercial.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the LDR and the resource protection zones go, it was already an allowed use.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So right. So and that's where I want to add the performance standards.
Melanie.
Thanks. So I guess what I still am confused around is, given the feedback from the community, they do not want an asphalt batch plant anywhere. Certainly not by homes, certainly not in low density residential. So I similarly feel frustrated, Barb, around talking about things now, but here we are. Why aren't we talking about this, given the feedback we've gotten, as why are we allowing asphalt batching anywhere in the city beyond what's already existing? I don't remember us specifically discussing just not having it in any of the 3 that we already permit beyond the RP. No, just at all. Like, why aren't we talking about that given what we've heard?
Well, I think that's the nature of elective bodies, is that, you know, that was, I think that was the issue that was going to be before the council at the last council meeting, and until it was, you know, postponed to, and so there's some people that are going to maybe feel that it is appropriate, and some that aren't. I mean, that's the position that the council members are in on this thing.
But that's not my understanding, Mayor. My understanding is that if there, let's say, for example, there was no amendment on Monday and we went to a vote on this, on what we were going to vote on and voted it down, asphalt batching is still allowed just like it is today. So it isn't, the vote on Monday had nothing to do with voting up or down asphalt batch plants. It had to do with regulations around what we already allow and adding an additional zone into that. So that's, I just want to make sure everyone's clear, because I feel like there's continual confusing language on, oh, well, that's what we were talking about Monday. Like, no, it wasn't. It was particularly jarring to me to hear Ryan on Monday be like, well, this is going to happen anyway. Not that you said it like that, but that it can still happen, you know, which was absolutely right to say. So I'm curious what other council members are thinking now that we've heard all of the same public comment, we've gotten all the same emails. You know, are we willing to allow asphalt batch plants in the city that does not want it for, you know, I don't know, 24 jobs? I'm not sure what people are drawn to approve this for, but I'm curious to hear that.
Well, and I get right back to what I said before, and you're right. If it voted down, it'd still be allowed, but it is the nature of elective bodies to make those decisions. And certainly you have stated your opinion, Melanie, and I respect that. It's up to other council members as to where they land on the issue. I can't compel them to talk or to speak, but I understand, you know, what you're asking, and I truly appreciate that. Patrick.
Thank you, Mayor. And Melanie, and I think I understood where you were going with your questions, is because there's so many moving parts, one of them being all the zoning changes for the purpose of, you know, obviously for the purpose of proposing an asphalt plant. And then we've got the IDR currently prohibiting them in the majority of the city. Would it, I'm not sure how that would be approached, but does it shift the focus from the IDR being considered as a permanent adoption versus just monkeying back and forth with all zoning to accommodate the applicant? Or that goes back, also goes back to my original point of doing it through the comp plan east side and taking a hard look at the overall vision of the east side. Because if the intent is to allow the asphalt, we're going to have a lot of changes in that east side plan, or at least need to reevaluate what we looked at along 410 and throughout some of the other areas. At least that's my opinion anyway. So does it go back to a matter of, do we adopt the IDR as a permanent status, or do we extend it through the comp plan process? Or do we just let the asphalt be built? And it kind of narrows it down. I mean, granted, there's some odds and ends of tinkering to do with the code if it's going to be allowed, but it kind of, to me, it narrows it down to those 3 areas.
Okay, I have a clarification from Jason, then I'll call on Charlotte.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify one thing. when we look at the 2015 comprehensive plan amendment, or that, when we last amended it in 2015, and that's when the East Sumner neighborhood plan came into effect. There was never any doubt in staff's mind that Corliss was going to be mining for the foreseeable future. Right? I mean, that, and I think that gets lost. They always had the opportunity to batch asphalt prior to 2015. This was not a change that happened in 15. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that.
And Jason, and I think that's where my confusion is, because I've heard so many different explanations of that process, whether it be from staff, whether it be directly from the state, whether it be from the county. Whether or not Corliss is allowed to continue and or rebuild their existing operation, I don't think was ever in question. I absolutely support the continuation of what they do now and rebuilding should there be a catastrophic event. My question is regarding adding the accessory use of asphalt batching, which yes, it is included. My understanding and the way it was explained to me by ecology was that yes, it is something that can be allowed, but it is something that there is an adjustment to their permit process that has to be made in order to allow that. I believe it's through an amended permit or something to that effect. But there was a change that was needed as explained to me by the state, but I hear from the city staff that that is not the case. So that raises more questions for me. I also, in speaking with members of or folks around the county, just trying to get an idea of what that looks like, is that yes, there is possibility and a conditional use permit, a possibility in the county property right adjacent to where it's currently being looked at. Corliss has stated they're exploring that as an alternative. I totally respect that. But it's just so many different things coming from so many directions. And to me, I don't have a consistent answer coming from any of them.
Well, all I'll say to that is, if you go back to 2015 comp plan, it was an allowed use much earlier than that. There was no change in 15 that allowed this to happen. And it was always deemed that they would, when they reclaim the land, that's when it would turn into LDR. But until then, their mining activities are a protected activity.
Okay. Charlotte.
For for all of us and for everyone listening, I want to make sure that my intent and my request is very clear. I am not requesting that we remove the prohibition on asphalt plants in general commercial. I am not requesting a rezone to anything. So I just want to make sure that these issues are not getting confused or mixed up. This has nothing to do with the applicant or their text amendment request. Nothing. It's where for years, without anyone noticing, this is just to cover protections for where we already allowed them. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if we never see one in any of these, because why wouldn't we have? Someone would have already vested. But just in case, protections for where we've always been okay. And by the way, and I have heard from people who are not comfortable with asphalt, on the east side, but are okay with the north, away from homes. So I don't know that I would blatantly characterize everyone as just, hell no anywhere. But regardless, and that's a debate for another time, regardless, I'm just requesting for that, wherever we do allow it, that we have these protections, which I also think helps us with the county should applicants go that route instead. It gives us some ground to stand on when we work with them. Sorry, I just wanted to be clear about what I was requesting and what I was not requesting.
Okay. long as Jason and Andrea are clear about what you were requesting and not requesting. I've been trying to write it down, but
I think we're clear on what Councilmember Newman would like. I guess where I'm now a little unclear is if she really has a second to bring it back. Because I thought that was Councilmember Peterson, but I think that may not be entirely accurate.
So I think I'm still the second. I'm, again, I'm gonna side here with Barb. I want to see it, written. Like, I have a clear idea of what I want, but I want to make sure Charlotte and I are on the same page around essentially approving it the way it is, adding her 2 pieces and taking out GC. That's my understanding. So if we're on the same page, then yes.
Okay, I think we have a second. So Mayor, what I would propose, because making amendments from the dais.
I'm right there with you, Jason. We're not gonna do that. We're gonna discuss it again before it comes to the meeting.
So we will add this to the Monday study session and have
Exactly.
a draft ordinance for you all to look at and make any other adjustments. And then just to clarify, we will not be noticing a public hearing to extend the IDR.
That's the feeling I'm getting, unless I don't see enough votes. I know, Patrick, you supported it, but I really didn't see him. Haven't heard from the deputy mayor. I've been seeing her hand in front of the screen for a long time, but I haven't heard from her. So I'm gonna.
I just raised my hand.
Yeah, you
I
finally
just
did
raised
that.
my hand.
You finally
Yeah.
did that. Thank you.
I know.
Go ahead. And then back to Patrick.
I just want to thank you for having it written out so that we can look at it and not having to make the decision when we're there. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Brown, go ahead, Kurt.
I like pictures.
Okay.
No, I do. And the one I don't like Charlotte's the one point where trucks can only leave during certain times. I don't think that's fair. The traffic is cut through traffic coming down the hill. I mean, I don't know. They're a business. That's it.
I wouldn't be offended with, like, I'd like to see the draft in full form, but I wouldn't be offended with an amendment, like, after we see it, like, with an amendment to remove that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. One thing we need to do is we need to get it in written form and stuff so we can look at it, and then we can discuss that next Monday. Go to Patrick, then I'll go back to Kathy.
And then, hello.
This
Oh,
whole
excuse me.
discussion goes back to my point that we're trying to make decisions within a 12-day time frame and juggle things around to meet a deadline versus going back to the overall process for the whole area.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. I'm going to go to Barb because she's doing the hand wave to me, so we'll do that. Then go back to you, Kathy. Go ahead, Barb.
So if we want to come in and talk about this with staff, what days is Jason in the office and what days are Andrea in the office?
We are actually on different teams. So actually the best way to do it is
Show up every day?
no, on Zoom. If you want to set some time up in the next 2 days, both of us are, I believe, here. Andrea's here,
Okay.
I think, right? I don't remember vacation.
No,
Okay.
I'm physically in the state of Washington. I'm in the office on Mondays and Tuesdays, as is Ryan. And
Okay,
Jason's in the office on Wednesdays and Thursdays during a typical week, but we can be flexible.
all right. That's helpful because I think I'd like to be able to sit across from somebody and talk about it. Thanks.
As long as you're wearing your mask, Barb. Check your temperature before you
I have a
enter the
lot.
building. Make sure you don't have a temperature before you come into the building. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, just a confirmation. I agree with Kurt on the traffic issue. I think it's it's their business when they run their trucks. They have already said most of them will go out at night anyway. And I don't think we need to override their business decisions on that. So there we go.
Okay. I'm looking around for other hands. Okay, Patrick, I'm gonna call on Cindy since you've had more turns than she has. Go ahead, Cindy.
I would like a hard copy of Andrea's presentation tonight, just left in my box so I can pick it up and read through it thoroughly. And also, maybe I would, are they going to print up, or are they going to have the amendments written fairly quickly here? So that could be included? Or is that not going to happen? That won't happen until after we have the next study session.
No, we'll have the amended ordinance. It might be Friday before we can get it out, but we'll have it in your box or sent to you electronically based on your preferences.
Okay.
Along with an amended agenda for Monday's study session.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Okay, Patrick.
I just wanted to clearly understand, since there's not enough or not a second even to bring up the IDR extension, that it will expire on July 20th, and on July 21st, Corliss or anybody else could start the process to vest in asphalt batching. Is that the case?
In the LDR and RP zones on their property, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So what I heard is that staff will be working up a draft ordinance that will be available by hard copy for some of you that want in that form by this weekend, and electronically for others. You will modify the agenda for the 20th of July study session to add this item so that council can read over that item, comment on it, discuss it, etc., so that then it can be in hopefully final form for action. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct. And we'll talk Monday about procedurally what the 20th will look like, because Councilmember Newman or any other council
Right.
member will need to revive the motion on the underlying ordinance, make the amendment, and then take the vote.
Correct. Okay. Okay, so we have a plan moving forward. Jason, any other business before the council this evening?
You know, I just want to thank council for hanging with us. I know this has been a long process, and I know that there's a lot of moving pieces and can be confusing at times. So I really appreciate everybody and their patience and helping staff come up with your plan and make sure that we can implement it for you.
Yeah, I would echo that. Okay, that being the case, this meeting is adjourned at 7:14. Have a good evening, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you.